Everybody's getting better, except the officials. So we got to find a way to remedy it. I mean, you've heard every coach talk about it, so I don't know what the answer.
What happens when the Prairie prodigy, the breakout star of the WNBA, finally snaps at the coach who seems determined to clip her wings? Who will blink first when Caitlin Clark, brimming with second-year brilliance, locks horns with Stephanie White in a locker room showdown for the ages?
Caitlin, for this first, I know you and JC go way back to the Big Ten. What was going on with the championess there, and what explanation were you given for the tech that you got?
I'll take the official.
The locker room door slammed with the force of a thunderclap, rattling every locker and drawing every ear in the hallway. Inside, tension crackled like static as Caitlin Clark's simmering frustration finally boiled over against the coach, whose playbook she felt was written in a language designed to silence her talents. The Indiana Fever season hung in the balance, teetering between explosive potential and the suffocating grip of a system that prized motion over mastery. Clark's eyes, usually alight with the thrill of competition, burned with disbelief as she unleashed her critique. Each word a projectile aimed squarely at coaching decisions she believed were sabotaging her career. It was a collision of ego and expertise, talent against tactics, a spectacle of raw emotion set to rewrite the narrative of superstar empowerment in women's basketball.
Questions. There wasn't an explanation for the tech that she got. I think it was pretty obvious that stuff was brewing, right? When the officials don't get control of the ball game.
Every forced rotation, every inexplicable substitution, and every stagnant quarter had stacked like kindling, waiting for one spark to ignite the inferno. For months, fans wondered why the franchise built its marketing campaign around a generational phenom, only to shunt her to the bench when the lights shone brightest. Clark had carried the Fever into arenas they hadn't visited in years, turning sold-out crowds into her personal playground, only to see her influence muted by a system allergic to high usage and rhythmic control. The explosive exchange with White was more than a mid-season tantrum. It was the manifestation of a philosophical chasm between player and coach, between star and system. As voices rose and chairs scraped the floor, it became clear that this moment would define more than one game. It would sculpt the contours of how stars demand respect in a league still discovering its own identity.
When they allow that stuff to happen, and it's been happening all season long. All season long. It's not just this game, it's been happening all season long. This is what happens, right? This is what happens.
By the time the door crashed shut behind them, the hallway had fallen silent, but the storm inside refused to subside. Clark, chest heaving, challenged White's authority in a voice that left no room for misinterpretation. Change your game plan, or I'm out of here. White, composed yet visibly unsettled, met her star's glare with the steely resolve of a coach trained to defend her system at all costs. Words were traded like blows, each syllable loaded with months of explosive frustration and wasted potential. Teammates caught between loyalty and desperation watched helplessly as two titans of the Fever universe clashed over the soul of the offense. When the dust settled, the stakes could not have been higher. The franchise had to decide whether to side with the coach who preached balance or the player who embodied brilliance.
You've got competitive women who are the best in the world at what they do, right? And when you allow them to play physical and you allow these things to happen, they're going to compete. And they're going to have their teammates back.
In the aftermath, social media erupted into a digital roar. Free Caitlin trended under Fever posts, accompanied by stormy screenshots of angry fans demanding action from the front office. Some threatened to withhold their support until Clark's touches climbed back to the levels fans had paid to see. Sponsors whispered concerns about the optics of silencing a marquee player who had become synonymous with the league's rising popularity. National broadcasters tiptoed through post-game interviews as if defusing a bomb, aware that every word was scrutinized by a fandom fueling a full-blown revolt. It was no longer a coaching debate, it was a referendum on star power, on whether the Fever would embrace the very talent they had advertised or buckle under the weight of a rigid system. And with every passing minute, the pressure mounted for the front office to make an unmistakable choice.
It's exactly what you expect, right? Out of fierce competition. So, I started talking to the officials in the first quarter. And we knew
The fallout from that locker room eruption rippled through Indiana faster than a three-point buzzer beater. Fans awoke the next morning to headlines screaming, "Clark vs. White," while local radio hosts replayed every heated syllable as if it were game tape. Season ticket holders debated at coffee shops whether loyalty belonged to the coach who preached balance or to the emerging icon who demanded the ball in her hands. Sponsors quietly reviewed their contracts, calculating the cost of alienating the league's most electrifying talent. Meanwhile, the Fever front office convened an emergency meeting, the air thick with tension as executives weighed the franchise's identity against rigid coaching doctrine. Every voice in that room carried the weight of tomorrow's ticket sales, tonight's television ratings, and the long-term credibility of a team that advertised Clark as its centerpiece.
this was going to happen. You could tell it was going to happen. So they got to get control of it. They got to be better. Get control of the game is call the fouls that are actually happening on the floor. Right, and consistently.
Behind closed doors, the conversation grew bitter. One director argued that White's system would yield consistent wins once players embraced her vision, invoking past successes in college tournaments. Another countered that collegiate blueprints crumble under the bright lights and egos of professional sports. They debated usage rates and assist percentages as if those metrics held the final word on team chemistry. But no spreadsheet could capture the raw, undefinable spark Clark brought to the floor. Her presence infused arenas with an energy that transcended points and rebounds. The real question wasn't about shot charts. It was whether a franchise could thrive by sidelining its brightest light.
Only call the fouls that are actually happening on the floor. Okay, not just if somebody swings and misses, right? Consistently call the fouls.
Coach, do you think...
As the Fever prepared for their next tip-off, the locker room buzzed with uncertainty. Teammates shifted nervously, exchanging furtive glances whenever coaches walked by. Practices felt charged, each drill loaded with unspoken pressure to pick a side. Would they feed Clark when the KG defense collapsed on her? Or would they stick to White's motion offense, sacrificing half-court brilliance for a rotating carousel of passes? The players knew the stakes extended beyond wins and losses. Their careers, marketability, and personal bonds all hung in the balance of a philosophical tug-of-war. Every cut, every screen, and every dribble became a statement of loyalty to one camp or the other.
Think it's something pertaining to your team, or do you think this is a league-wide issue?
Well, I've seen quite a few dust-ups in the league so far, so I think it's a league-wide issue. I mean, bad officiating is bad officiating.
Television crews descended on Indiana for the rematch against the Las Vegas Aces, armed with cameras trained on every warm-up drill. Analysts dissected footage of Clark maneuvering through traffic, poking holes in the spacing and timing designed by White. They replayed Clark's patented outside-in dribble, wondering why that very move was discouraged in crunch time. Pundits noted that when Clark drove the lane, defenders collapsed, freeing teammates for open shots. Yet those teammates often stood motionless, awaiting the system-mandated swinging feed. It was a catch-22, trust the superstar's instincts, or adhere to a blueprint that diluted her impact. In front of millions, the Fever's identity crisis played out in real time.
And then what did you make of Sophie Cunningham's flagrant foul on JC towards the end?
It was a flagrant foul.
Think it's like defending Caitlin or defending the team, or...
When the Aces game tipped off, the tension was almost tangible. Clark received the opening inbound, but hesitated as three defenders keyed in on her. A split-sec choice flashed before her: force the issue or revert to the slow-cycle offense. She chose to attack, pivoting past the first defender, then slipping a crisp pass to an open wing. The arena erupted, but White called timeout mid-leg. The coach's eyes flicked toward Clark, a visible admonishment that stunned viewers at home. That timeout symbolized the chasm between raw talent and rigid strategies. It crystallized the question every fan was now asking: who truly runs this team?
How do you view just how it all...
I view it as a flagrant foul.
I'll ask about the game, too.
Yeah, well, I mean, you guys came for basketball.
Yeah,
Let's
no,
talk
seriously.
about basketball.
Yeah.
Come on now.
What do you think of just how you all were able to pull away in the second half, Caitlin, in particular?
In the locker room after the first quarter, Clark's frustration simmered again. Her jersey damp with sweat, she bluntly questioned White about that late timeout. Coaches and players formed a tight circle, unsure whether to intervene or let the stars collide. White defended her choice, citing balance and unpredictability as her guiding principles. Clark shot back that unpredictability rang hollow when it confined the game's most dynamic player to the margins. Voices rose, accusations flew, and once again the locker room door bore the brunt of overzealous emotion. There were no winners in that standoff, only the realization that the Fever stood at a crossroads. Outside the arena, social channels combusted. Clips of Clark's drive and pass, juxtaposed with the timeout, sparked thousands of comments. "Let her play or lose her," demanded fervent supporters. "This is her moment," echoed another chorus. Hashtags like "Release the Beast" and "Let Clark Drive" trended nationwide. National outlets picked up the story, framing it as a cautionary tale of what happens when coaching philosophies clash with superstar expectations. The narrative transcended Indiana. It became a league-wide warning sign. Any franchise that stifles the very stars it promotes risks finding itself starless. Back in practice the next day, White rolled out new sets intended to bridge the divide. She designed plays that opened the floor for Clark's vision while still emphasizing movement from role players. Clark, wary yet hopeful, ran through each pattern with crisp execution. But that glimmer of hope dimmed when White scrapped several of those sets before the next game. The coach cited data on efficiency and ball reversals, but the players heard only uncertainty. They wondered whether any plan would stick long enough to build confidence. The cycle of promise and revision left each athlete questioning their role and the direction of the entire season. Meanwhile, league insiders whispered that other coaches watched Indiana's drama with intense interest. Some saw an opportunity. A veteran bench coach or offensive-minded assistant could be waiting in the wings, ready to tailor a system around Clark's strengths. Rumors swirled of front office scouts from Seattle and Los Angeles lurking in Fever stands, evaluating Clark as both a potential trade asset and the linchpin of a new dynasty elsewhere. Those whispers added fuel to the fire. If Indiana couldn't harness her, someone else might. The specter of Clark donning another uniform next season hung over every Fever huddle like a restless ghost.
Clark, whether she'll play or not. Wilson misses on a three, and Stephanie White gets a technical on the sideline. Look at Caitlin.
The next broadcast featured a sideline interview with Clark after a hard-fought loss. When asked about chemistry, she paused, choosing her words carefully. "We all want to win," she said, "but winning looks different when your strengths guide the plan." That measured response sent shockwaves. It undercut the idea that she was merely a petulant talent and reframed her as a legitimate leader demanding alignment between role and responsibility. White's defense, that she valued every player's contribution, felt increasingly hollow in the face of Clark's composed critique. The public relations battle had shifted. Clark now commanded the narrative. By mid-season, the Fever's record hovered around 500, a far cry from preseason predictions that heralded Clark's arrival as the dawn of a new era. Attendance dipped as fans questioned whether they were paying to see a star or sit through a system. Merchandise sales of Clark jerseys remained robust, a stark contrast to the team's dwindling win-loss columns. Front office emails overflowed with fan pleas to just feed Caitlin and restore the excitement that defined her first season. Those emails, printed and circulated among executives, weighed heavily on every decision. The franchise faced an existential choice: recommit to White's philosophy or pivot decisively toward Clark's leadership.
Clark, give her a high five.
Behind the scenes, supporters of White pointed to moments when the Fever succeeded without Clark at the focal point. They cited a mid-season victory in Phoenix where balanced scoring and rotation play stunned onlookers. But Clark's fans countered that victories achieved by sidelining your best player were Pyrrhic. They argued that championships required elevating stars when it mattered most. Neither side budged, and the impasse became a microcosm of a larger debate in modern basketball: system or superstar. Indiana Fever had become the case study, and all eyes were on how quickly they would choose a side before the season slipped away. Pressure from the league office added another layer of complexity. The WNBA, eager to showcase its rising stars, issued quiet reminders about nurturing marquee talent. Commissioner's Office communications urged teams to highlight their biggest draws, to protect the investments made in player marketing. While not explicitly naming names, the subtext was clear: let your stars shine or risk league-wide consequences in viewership and sponsorship. Fever executives recognized the implicit ultimatum. The balance between autonomy and league expectations had tilted decisively toward player empowerment. Indiana could no longer afford to treat its crown jewel as an interchangeable cog.
On the sideline. Look at Caitlin Clark give her a high five.
In the final weeks before the trade deadline, rumor mills churned with scenarios. Some speculated the Fever would trade Clark to address roster balance, using her value to shore up bench depth. Others believed the front office would fire White mid-season and install a coach who pledged full faith in Clark's talents. Less likely, but not impossible, was a mutual parting of ways between star and franchise, freeing Clark to explore free agency early. Each scenario carried seismic implications for the league's competitive balance. Fans awaited the deadline with bated breath, knowing that whatever happened would echo for years. As the deadline loomed, the Fever's leadership team met one last time. It was no longer a question of philosophical debate. It was about survival, of ticket sales, viewership ratings, and franchise reputation. They had to choose: protect a coaching ideology or embrace the superstar the league itself had billed as the face of the future. The room fell silent as the final vote was cast. The decision would reverberate beyond Indiana, shaping not just one season, but the evolution of team star dynamics across the W.
Young to Wilson, beautiful.
Caitlin Clark did not hold back after the Fever's embarrassing.
Indiana stepped onto the court the following evening with renewed clarity. Clark dribbled into the backcourt, received a clear path to the hoop, and the offense flowed through her hands like electricity. The first quarter ended with her orchestrating the team's best performance of the year. The bench erupted, fans roared, and the scoreboard reflected an efficiency previously unseen in Fever home games. Whether that triumph marked the start of a true partnership between coach and star, or merely a temporary reprieve, remained to be seen. But for one glorious night, Caitlin Clark ran free, and the Fever felt alive again.
Loss to the Aces, she called it like it is. We shot ourselves in the leg. Turnovers, fouls, bad execution.
If you're fired up by Caitlin's breakout performance and want to witness every electrifying moment, hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and drop free Caitlin in the comments below. Let's make sure the Fever front office hears our voice loud and clear.